Good morning, everyone. Yeah, we still get woos. After 48 hours, people are still wooing. To me, that is actually the biggest sign of success. So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming back to the final presentations of the DC Big Data Dive. Yes, woo is right. You guys have selflessly given up your Friday night, your entire Saturday, and as I heard some people saying, we couldn't quite sleep because we were having too much fun playing with Amazon, some of your entire Saturday nights just to be here to work on data for the greater good, which is incredible. As we said when we opened this up, there's actually a lot of analogies to diving and doing a data dive. You dig in, you go slowly and carefully, you dive with a buddy, and that analogy remains to today, where we are now sort of coming back up to the surface. We're returning to reality from the depths of data that we've immersed ourselves in this weekend. And we're doing so in thoughtfully and carefully thinking about the adventure and the process of what we went through over these couple of really, I was going to say days, but really about one day, about 24 hours. So today is a chance to get to see all of the amazing results that everyone in the room around you worked on. This is a chance for the people who weren't here to dive with us to actually see what goes on at one of these things, the amazing patterns people found, the incredible findings that people have come up with over this weekend. Now, I want to remind everyone that any one of these groups could talk for an hour. They have done far more work than I could have imagined doing for a graduate degree. So there's a huge amount of information here that we assure you we will be collecting and distributing out after this. But today we want to get a taste of what happened. So I've asked everyone to sort of give the biggest highlight of what they found to be interesting and what the biggest next steps were. So we'll have all of the, what we're going to have are the data ambassadors, the people who work tirelessly to lead these teams throughout the weekend, come up and present to you the problems they worked on and the results they came up with. We're going to keep this fairly quick because there are, one of the good downsides of having so many great people is that there are a lot of really good projects. And my apologies to anyone who won't be able to show their particular visualization on the screen. Again, we will be honoring that online, and we'll put that all together for everyone to see later. So without further ado, could I just ask that the data ambassadors, like last time, kind of line up here? So if you're, and the presenters, Mark and Ben as well, if you don't mind just being here so we can just sort of quickly move on and off. And so you guys know we're keeping the presentations to be quick overviews, but there will be time for 1 or 2 questions between each talk. So if you're a World Bank expert or someone who's just interested who wants to ask a question, there will be some time for that. So without further ado, why don't we just get straight to the presentations. And the very first group up, if I just put this, there we go, is Max Richmond from Team Indizi. Max Richmond.
I will. Hey everybody, I'm Max. Thanks for joining us this morning. First thing I want to do is give an incredible shout out to Team Ndizi. Ndizi, for those who didn't hear earlier, is the Swahili word for banana. I think you'll soon find out why that's our team name. I'd like to call out specifically Brian, who's here this morning, Mariko, Anna, and Wolfgang, our counterpart from the World Bank, who've been phenomenal. So in addition to them, I'd like to mention some folks who are hopefully still planning to come. Sarab from the World Bank, Franz, Monica, Andrew, Peter, Kristen, Setra, Ben, Anush, and Evgeny. We could not have done this without all of you. Thank you so much. So wait, that sounds like an Academy Award speech. Anyways, all right, here we go. So what is the problem? Why are we doing this? Number one, we want faster, open sources of food prices and consumption data for faster and easier estimates of inflation. No big deal, right? Okay, well, we found out from Wolfgang that food can often be 1/3 of inflation, perhaps in Kenya or other places. Inflation hurts the poor and it hurts lenders who don't know what they should be choosing for interest rates. So what did we do? Well, first we started with bananas. We started with a crowdsourced website that had banana prices around the world, and we looked specifically at what those were by continent and by region, and we taught 5 new people how to scrape who'd never done web scraping before. 3 of them went and created their own web scrapers as a result of that. That's super exciting to me. So what did we do beyond that? Well, after we learned how to web scrape with bananas, we decided to dig into some Africa data. We looked specifically at official and unofficial sources. We looked at an unofficial source from Kenya called M-Farm that has price data by day, which is super exciting, of specific commodities. So we're really excited to dig in more in that. We found data from supermarkets. We found data from expat websites. We found data crowdsourced, one called Numbeo, one called WhoMunch, that people just submit prices, all these open sources for potential price data. I want to also mention that we have a map here where we mapped out by over the last 60 days what maize prices are like in 4 different subregions of Kenya. But number 3, so we just sort of dove into Africa, and we have more charts here. Please have a look on our GitHub page. I've been tweeting it out. Focused on Indonesia, and this is really the main one I want to talk about today, because I think this visual tells a major story, and our one major takeaway today, that we can do this. You know, it's worth exploring in greater detail how these open data sources can complement existing official data sources. What we have here, the bottom green line, is the world price for rice that we've gotten from Index Mundi. Above it, we have the FAO price for in-country, how much rice costs. And above that, we have prices we scraped from Twitter, prices that we scraped, a few data points. You see they're a little sparse, but data we've also scraped from a supermarket chain, Carrefour, in Indonesia. In addition to that, we also specifically looked at the Wayback Machine and Internet Archives and looked at the Carrefour websites from previous time periods. So we were able to fill it, and you see quite a gap of $1 between the FAO estimates and the 2 grains of rice that we looked at, 2 variety of rice brands. You know, certainly these are urban markets. There are lots of limitations, but is it worth exploring? Absolutely. So to that effect, what are our next steps? Number 1, the Global Pulse was here. We've been working with them. We know they're going to be doing more about Indonesia. We're super stoked to help them out with that. Number 2, we now have, as the result of some great scraping yesterday, 100,000 records of food price data from Kenya, stretching over 1,000 days, disaggregated by region, that we want to analyze against the same data we have from FAO and World Indicators. With that, I just want to say thank you, and look forward to doing more of this in the future.
I just want to point that out again, by the way. Like, I know, you know, when you look at a graph, you might think, okay, I'm looking at a graph. They're pointing out a difference of $1 in food prices, rice prices, from what the FAO is estimating and what they were able to find.
And sorry, and also, like, you can see the gap. The orange section is where there is no FAO data. They just don't have that data yet, and potentially this is a leading indicator.
Very cool. I think that's amazing. So we do have time for 1 or 2 questions. Actually, so I'll just keep Max up here. So opening up, if anyone has 1 or 2 questions we can take. It's okay if not. We can keep things moving.
We're still in the front of the room. You can grab us whenever.
Okay, great. So you know Max and Wolfgang. So if you have questions for them after, go find them. Amazing work. Really fantastic. Next up, I'd like to welcome Tom Levine from the Arabic Tweets team. Hey, Tom.
As Max just discussed, conventional poverty measures are quite time-consuming and expensive to collect, so we wanted to see if we could use social media as a rough proxy for these established indicators. We started with 100 million tweets, and they looked like this. Quite nice. So some of our team spoke Arabic, and they came up with groups with keywords about everyday items. So one line is everyday items, economic status, and emotion. And so we see that these words are mentioned, but there isn't much of a pattern. And even if we had seen a pattern, the meaning would be somewhat unclear and dubious because we haven't related this to any real indicator. So we thought about ways of doing that. One way is if we can find some indicator that should vary periodically over time, we should be able to relate that to the tweets. So this is over day of the week, but you could also do it based on season or holidays. We could also use locations because a lot of poverty data already are related to location. So these are mentions of country hashtags. That's one way of getting location. These are the number of times they were mentioned in the data set. We could also use daily trends. So if we look at when during the day a tweet was posted for a particular user, we can figure out which time zone the user's in. So I talked about some pretty obvious variables, but there are some things you might not realize you could extract from tweets. Just as an example, there's research on extracting the gender of speakers. So we could figure out the gender of people tweeting, and that could be useful in some model. There's also some research relating social connectedness to socioeconomic status. So people who are more connected should be wealthier. We looked at the @ mentions in the tweets and created this visual, where the big dots that are not very visible are people who are very connected. So it would be interesting to see if these people are wealthier. So generally, no real robust conclusions, but there's definitely potential in using Twitter data and other social media data for measuring poverty. And can the team stand up?
Oh yeah, the poverty Arabic tweets team. Give it up. Santiago from the poverty team was working with you guys earlier. I don't know if he's here, where he is, but it was also awesome. So before we take questions, I just want to point out that this team was given 100 million Arabic tweets to analyze without even a specific question. There wasn't even an expert to say we'd like to know this or that. And from that, we're able to discern that you may be able to, just listening to the language that not everyone spoke, the gender, the connectedness, what country someone might be from. So I think those are just incredible potential ideas that you could glean from looking at social media to understand socioeconomic work. So another round of applause for that. Do you have any questions from the audience? Yes, from Neil.
Could you say a bit more about the map? What's that show?
You mean this?
Yeah.
All this shows is to remind you that there are centers of connection. We didn't really look at this, except, they exist. This is something you could consider, and it looks pretty. What? Actually, the bigger reason is we had it all loaded in the database, and we wanted to use that, and we were playing with the sample all day, so Max overnight, even though he wasn't on the team, just like, with this up, yeah.
And so quickly, how would you describe like a point on this graph?
So specifically, you have every user who tweeted, and then all the mentions all the people they mentioned. And so basically, it's a series of connections between those individuals, and they're tighter together for the people who communicate more regularly with each other.
Right. And the colors?
The colors are clusters, so groups that seem to talk with each other more. So the top 3 clusters, each one had about 10% of the total nodes, so some of those had sort of groups, but it was pretty dispersed network.
Awesome.
But anyways, this was,
So
more
for,
to do, but I guess between 2 and 3 in the morning, this is what we're doing.
right, these are those people doing this at 2 and 3 in the morning, number one, which is amazing. But for those who couldn't quite hear that, that's everyone who was talking in this data set and connected by who they were talking to and who they were mentioning, the colors relating sort of people who are close to each other, very tightly connected. Very cool. Yeah, one more?
Yep.
Yeah, I think we all agree you created a pretty awesome piece of art as well. Really. And as you were doing this, were there any other data sets that your team wished you had in addition to, like, you came across, say, wish we had this, we could add this to that?
Detailed location. Detailed location.
Detailed location of the tweets, right?
So you weren't able to get that from the Twitter, that wasn't included, Geos, maybe?
Twitter doesn't take a personal number.
Yeah.
I couldn't.
So Twitter doesn't, I think it does. So I've done this before. You have to, it's like the documentation for the Twitter API is sort of wrong in this aspect, I think, when I did it before. So you can get the locations, but it's harder. There are other ways we could have gotten location, and that's one thing we would have liked to have location. But also, oh shoot. I'm not going to remember properly right now, but yeah.
We have lots in the hack pad.
Yeah.
So we could go with that. Yes, Persona.
Okay.
Good to know.
So came from Qatar Institute and stripped out the location.
Great. So that's something we could have. Amazing work. So even without that, great stuff. Thank you guys. All right. Next up, sort of team presenting. I'd like to present Max Schroen and Nick McClellan. Guys.
Hi, everybody.
Hey.
Hey, Jake. So we have a really big group. We really split up into 2 or sort of logistically 3 different groups looking at how we can predict changes in poverty from satellite light data. So that's the big picture. Nick's group worked on map exploration and understanding data. And so Nick, if you want to go ahead and how do you go to the next one?
Sorry, you guys are in different tabs.
So we made different, 3 different sort of sets of maps, some descriptive maps, some overlays with some of the data, and we did this map just showing basically the 5 years of light data that we had, 2001 to 2002. And I mean, we were going to animate this, but there really wasn't a ton of difference that you see here. We were hoping to see a lot of difference down in the south of Bangladesh related to the 2004 tsunami, but we really didn't see that. But we did see some other interesting visualization. This is poverty change 2001 to 2005. These are just descriptive maps. We also did the number of poor people. And we also added, and that's an estimation of poverty multiplied by the poverty rate. But we did these maps with the light overlay, and it's kind of hard to see maybe on the projector, but you can see, like in this case, like areas where the poverty got worse. There's not a lot of light there. Number of poor as well. And we did, poverty 2001, poverty 2005.
Show also that he's got data in the thing.
Oh, yeah. We've got rollover access to a lot of the descriptive statistics. And all of this we have on our HackPad. Access to electricity. This is an interesting map because it shows, sort of lines up the light, obviously, with where the concentration of access to electricity is. We also mapped literacy and population. And basically, we just got a good kickstart on making some really interesting graphics to join with what Max was doing.
Okay. How do you change? Okay. Is there a button to switch between them?
It's a little messy, but if you use these two and left and right, will work. There's probably a slicker way.
Got it. So that's great. So what we were trying to do was split up the work a bit between the folks who were doing the exploratory mapping and some of the folks who were doing the predictive modeling and some more of the data merging. So we had a lot of people writing different models, and some of them were more or less successful. Some of them are still in progress. One of the cleanest ones we found was just looking at predicting poverty levels from light data, assuming you had no other information. Assuming there was no World Bank information, there was nothing else, you actually get a fairly decent approximation to the poverty level within each tiny little upazila within Bangladesh with just that information. But obviously, the World Bank already collects higher quality poverty data from the small area census estimation, and the Bangladeshi government they work with them to also collect small census data. So the real question we were trying to answer was, how can we not just get the light to poverty level, but predict changes in poverty from changes in light? So that blue line over there is a bug that shouldn't be there. But you can see from a model that we made that was actually fairly decent, that we're definitely able to make some amount of prediction in the changes in poverty from changes in light, along with census data, along with access to schools and roads. We've definitely found that even if you control for electricity and existing measures that we think correlate with poverty, light is still actually a useful additional information indicator, even apart from anything else. So we've actually started working on a write-up of this, explaining how this could potentially be a useful thing. So anyway, we have a lot more interesting stuff to do. We got a tweet last night from someone, sent us a thing from UN Global Pulse of using infrared light as well for doing larger scale poverty work. So we'd love to introduce infrared light. We have more data sources we'd like to include. We think that there's a lot of potential here to make a tool that is very inexpensive and high frequency to get poverty data, even for people who may not otherwise emit information that is easy to pick up with other big data sources. And we, again, if our team could stand up and give us a round of applause, they did a great job with this. Oh, yeah. And Nubo, who's here from the World Bank, was extremely useful, both in providing data and also with giving us expertise to understand what we were looking at, how the different poverty measures related. It was extremely helpful. Yeah, thank you. So, questions for either one of us? Yep. So we built a linear model, and this graph is the actual poverty level in that place by in the data that was actually collected and done small scale estimation by the bank, and then the y-axis is the predicted poverty level as a sum of the light and census and other information together. This one, oh, that's This one is the same kind of thing. Again, this is a graph of the model output. This is the actual poverty level against the predicted poverty level based on the model we fit with the light. We have another one where we use 2001 data to fit against 2005. And that one is obviously a bit messier, but still excellent. And again, this is on held out. This is not on the same training data. Yep.
I noticed you said you got the data from Guatemala.
Oh, we have data from Guatemala for 1994 poverty levels and 2002 poverty levels. It's a bit bigger time jump. We figured we'd have better luck with Bangladesh to start, so that's what we've done so far.
So my question, it was Guatemala and Bangladesh is what's the data for your study here, right?
This is all just Bangladesh for now.
Yeah,
Why there?
We were able to get access to Bangladesh small-scale poverty estimates, which is the thing we wanted to do this for. So that was the easiest data to get, so that's what we worked with to start. Also, one nice thing about Bangladesh is that there is a lot of bank activity there. So if in the future we wanted to relate this back to bank activity, there's a lot of really great data that's been put out already about the relationship between the bank and Bangladesh. And so that's the kind of thing which we hopefully would be able to see the effect of bank projects, which would be great.
And we may have to, I'm sorry, Wolfgang, can we grab that question after the presentations? Awesome. Let's give it up again for these guys. I just want to point out, you don't get poverty map data very frequently. It takes a long time to do, as Nomo described, and these guys were able to find light maps online, other census data that they merged together to not only build an interactive that you can just scroll through and see how everything's changed over time, but wrote an academic paper on predicting poverty levels from light in 24 hours. Like, that's what did you do with your Saturday? I didn't do that. That's insane. All right, so that's crazy, and that goes for all of these groups, and I'll be saying that a lot more, but that's astounding. So let's not slow down. To keep it coming, we're going to bring up Dan, Everett, and Neil to talk about their work with Ampara on the Latin American poverty team. Come on up, guys. Give them a round of applause. I open a new tab for them.
So I guess we have the speakers who are closest to the mic, so I'll just start there, and then we'll...
Great. So you guys, you want to grab on here real quick before...
Yes, thanks, Bob.
Great.
Yeah. Cool. All right, so if everybody remembers, we're mobile data for development. So the big idea is, can you do it? Any positive, any benefit? So what we're looking at is, really, can you do it? Are there any differences between particularly like the official data that's collected in the census? So what we're working with in terms of data, we've got the official Peruvian data set that's done face-to-face, that's a household survey, and then we've got mobile data sets coming in at 6 different periods of time, and we've got different collection methods for the mobile data. So that's just kind of an overall layout of what we're doing, and really what we're interested in seeing is, can we collect the same type of data in an accurate way via mobile as opposed to the face-to-face, which is obviously a little bit more expensive and time-consuming. So leading in?
Yeah, so we wanted to give some recommendations to the World Bank, and one of the cool things about this project is they went into the homes of 1,500 Peruvian families and asked them like 100 questions about their lives. You know, what kind of roof do you have? What is your income? How often do you work? How many hours? Things like that. And also, what they did is they did this long face-to-face interview, and then they followed up, you know, electronically via cell phone. And the only thing that they did is they published how often people responded via different mediums and under what conditions, but they didn't publish any information about the questions themselves. Like, what are these people like? How big are their families? How much do they work? There's a lot of just fascinating sociological data there that really needs to be addressed. And we had fun playing with it, but I think that would be our recommendation for further work for them.
So as far as what we actually found, is actually a really interesting, and we did focus mostly on the difference between if I can just scroll down to it, between the different types of, between the face-to-face versus the mobile. And all of the questions that we asked, so there are 7 questions that are the same between the 3 surveys that were asked 3 times, once face-to-face and then twice via mobile, or via follow-up, which was not necessarily always, it was either SMS, IVR, or CATI, which is where basically somebody calls you. And so what we found is that people are much more likely to, all the questions are in the form, did this bad thing happen to you in the last month? Right? So did somebody in your house miss school because they were sick in the last month. All 7 questions are in that form. And what we found is that people say yes about 3 times more often on the follow-up questions than on the face-to-face. And that's a really fascinating fact. So either people are underreporting in the face-to-face interview, or they're over-reporting on follow-up. There's a selection bias. Or there's an underreporting, and there's some data with physicians and addiction, actually, that suggests that it's probably an underreporting face-to-face as a comparison, that people sort of are ashamed to say that they lost their job in the last month if they're actually talking to a person. So this potentially means that not only could we get data more often than every few years in a very labor-intensive way by cell phone, we could actually maybe get better data than we were getting before. So super cool, and it's something we really are interested in pursuing and helping pushing the World Bank to pursue. It's super neat.
Neil covered all the really interesting bits, but the hypothesis was: are people embarrassed to say that I got robbed, or my child missed school because I couldn't pay? And so we kind of broke down how often they reported these negative things happening by how they were contacted, and that's the bottom one. I know the acronyms are obnoxious, but the SMS everyone gets, IVR is when a robot calls you on the phone, and CAT-T is when a person calls you on the phone. And so when a person calls you, you report you're the least likely to report that you were robbed in the last month, and you're much more likely when it's a robot or SMS.
But still a lot more than face-to-face. Still almost double what people report face-to-face when they're talking to somebody on the phone, but only about half of what they report if it's an SMS or by IVR.
This is pretty good tag teaming, by the way.
So we'll go into more detail, just stop us. So just the final point, a big thank you to Amparo, from Everett, from Neil, from Marta, Chris, Gisele, Tony, Derek, me, Daniel. Un abrazote grandissimo. Thank you very much. Your team was fabulous. And just to point out, 9:30 in the evening, running up to her office, getting us files. 9:30 in the morning, back here, giving hugs to everybody on the team. Amazing. Thank you.
Come back up real quick. Amazing work, incredible findings, and yes, Amparo was here from beginning to end, just an amazing advocate of this team. It's impressive. I think I went home before she did, frankly. So real quickly, questions for this team. Anybody have any thoughts? Nick.
Were you able to access any documentation about the original methodology and the justification? If you're just looking at data, you're kind of assuming some naivety part of the original.
Hard-hitting question.
Yeah.
No, yeah, so it was really interesting. The World Bank had done kind of their own study with the data leading up to this, and there were things that went into the methodology behind why they were choosing what they were choosing. And so it was a mad rush to process that in time to do some of the things that we were doing. But so there is a lot of detail for that.
And we did have all of the raw surveys, so the surveys were there were many more questions, and we correlated the questions that were asked identically between the two. And then we also, with talking to Amparo, were able to get a lot of the context of sort of why and how they were chosen. So yeah, I think we had a pretty good sense of that, I think.
They didn't tell us why they designed the survey how they did, if that's your question.
That's a good. I think that's a great point, and a good follow-up to say that anything we're presenting here is a finding from a weekend of jumping into an event with people just getting up to speed. These are just sort of spark the imagination, follow on efforts from these findings, but please do not take anything here as gospel. Don't rewrite World Bank policies. Yeah, please. Not that I assume anyone would. Not yet. Okay, not yet. Next week.
24 more hours. And
awesome. Oh yes, one from Alan.
Just a comment. I think it's very interesting, and this is just Peru data. And if you think about regions of the world where saving face is a major concept, like parts of Asia, you would probably see this discrepancy even significantly larger.
So to build on that, the thing I mentioned about physicians, we know that about 1% of physicians are under active treatment for depression at any given time. But if you survey large groups of physicians anonymously, which the American Medical Association and the Canadian Medical Association have both done, then like 15% of physicians screen positive. But there's such a sort of a disincentive in the medical profession to being diagnosed with something, with a mental health condition, that there's such a shame and a cultural barrier that it doesn't it just doesn't happen, and so physicians are not treated for these things. I think it could be really analogous. It could also, caveat, could be the other direction, right? That people are over-reporting by mobile. Like you have a selection bias in favor of the people something bad has happened to are more likely to answer the follow-up surveys, because there is a pretty big attrition rate between the face-to-face and the follow-up. So it could be either, but I think the really interesting one is and the one that makes the most sense intuitively is if it's sort of the shame and the underreporting up front and being more honest in an anonymous setting.
Excellent. Thank you again, guys. And that brings up two really quick things I want to mention. One is that I love what just happened. These guys are not answering questions throughout the weekend, as very few people could answer a question in this amount of time, but raising new questions. And I'm so glad that we're gifted to have people like that who are sensitive enough to say, we found something, it could be X, Y, or Z. I'm not just going to go out and blog and say, oh my God, people are underreporting and mobile or are afraid to say something. They're actually raising those ideas so that we can go back with experts and dig into those things. I think that's great. And another quick thing I need to mention is that some backstory that you may not know is that at DataKind, we make a big effort to work with groups ahead of time before an event, because a lot of thought has to go into preparing data, a lot of thought has to go into thinking about the problems. And all the people who have been presenting up here are what we call data ambassadors. I'm going to talk to them about them a little bit later, but they've all been working for months thinking about these problems and this data. Those guys, Daniel, Neil, and Everett, showed up yesterday. This was a new project that they had never worked on before, and they jumped in, they showed leadership, that whole team did. That entire team went with Amparo's guidance to dig into this together with sight unseen. So I just want to give it up again to them for that, because that's incredible, incredible. Thank you. So lest I slow things down, I want to turn things over next to Ben and Ken. So come on up, Ben and Ken. You sit up here. Awesome. Oops. This is you guys, right?
That's right.
Perfect. Awesome. And
okay. Hi, folks. We're a late entry, so let me give you some quick motivation and background. World Bank Group last year put out $52 billion in loans and credits of various kinds. Based on past experience, we expect that about 75 to 80% of those projects will be moderately satisfactory or better in achieving their objectives. That's pretty good, because development's a tough thing, but it means that $10 to $12 billion a year of projects are not performing up to the expectations. So imagine how good it could be if we could identify what are the factors that make a difference to performance. So we've tried to do that. Folks in the evaluation unit and the research unit thought about all the kind of standard things you might think of, the project size, the characteristics of the country. We can explain maybe 1/8 of the variation in project outcomes using the kind of standard measures. So let's take a different approach. We know projects are really complicated things. There are many connections between them, the kind of work they try to do, the people on the team, the way they're organized. Suppose we could visualize a network of projects and find clumps of projects that performed really well, clumps of projects that didn't perform so well, and then dig in and see what was going on there. So that was the challenge we posed. Ben here, the data set he came with didn't work. We gave him 8,000 projects about 3 o'clock yesterday. He sallied forth into cyberspace, and this is what he did.
Okay, so I guess you explained all the motivation, yeah. So I'm just going to jump into the data dive. And how we created the network. So given 2 projects, we have described the project through an amount of sectors and themes. And we decided to create this network of projects throughout their proximity with sectors and themes. We have encoded the visualization so you can really spot the important aspects. So the size will be the amount of a project, and the color, the bluer, the more satisfactory, the redder is the more unsatisfactory. So the result we had over 8,000 projects about, and 5 million edges, so it's quite a lot of information. We could actually cluster, as you can see, the projects by themes and sectors, meaning there is some semantic connection between those projects. They are bounded throughout the problems they want to approach. And you can see we can constrain a graph, because that's what we do, trying to cut a little bit this whole data set. And if we take deeper look into these clusters of projects, we can see a variety of outcomes. So a group of projects throughout the same themes and sectors can present different types of outcomes. So what we want to do now is to understand what lays behind. And we can focus, so here I've tailored you visualization. I hope it displays nice. And we might want to focus on one project. Let's say this financial sector restructuration could interest us. So we can grab this specific project and see its whole neighborhood, bring out the neighborhood, and see how much of the neighborhood project can have achieved a great outcome or an unsatisfactory outcome. But this doesn't give us a structure. So I've taken some ideas that I'm preparing for my thesis, actually, to put together two networks. One network will be formed of the projects together, and the other of the themes together and sectors. How do they relate to each other? And how can you match both pictures? So we are really doing an exploratory approach here. So this is what you get on our second prototype. And so we get two big graphs. And let's say we have identified a set of projects of interest, then we can have a deep loop in it and understand what are the connections between these projects, these specific projects, this specific subset of projects. And since it is exploratory, we can move on and check other groups of projects and other group of themes as well and sectors and see the projects related. So we just done the first iteration of a back and forth process. We need experts, field experts, who can do the in-depth analysis of these outcomes. We need to identify the subgroups of interest and those with similar outcomes. We want to extend a set of characteristics because this characteristic can be risk factors. We can refine the measure. We can, instead of putting themes and sectors, we can put people and the whole social network behind this project network. We can put semantic analysis of the objectives to understand what is behind. Maybe some type of projects tend to be more successful than others or more unsuccessful. So now we've paved the way for exploratory research, and it's just started. So if you have any question.
Amazing stuff. I mean, this lived as what, spreadsheets before this? Maybe a database?
Yeah, that was CSV files.
CSV files,
CSV.
right? Just lists of things that now you can visualize and have actually clustered together in terms of similarity. It's incredible. Any questions for Ben or for Ken?
Yeah, if you want to have the live demo and manipulate the data, you can come see me and I can show you really how it goes interactively, because what I'm doing is visual analytics. You have to get through it and manipulate it, touch it to understand.
It's cool. So you can actually go play with this afterwards.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right, cool. If you guys have more questions or want to use the tool, find Ben or Ken for this. And thank you guys again. It's awesome.
Thank you.
So next up, we have Mark Maxson and Dominic, who are going to present some work on looking a heuristic auditing tool for everyone. And you may notice that we've switched now with Ben and Ken from looking at sort of the idea of poverty over to fraud and corruption. Those were the two main tracks of this event. How do we find better measures for poverty? I should have said this up front. I assume everyone here kind of knows. But how do we find better measures of poverty? And now looking at how we can understand more about corruption in terms of people defrauding the bank with their projects. So without further ado, let's give it for Mark and Dominic.
Okay, good morning. This is the heuristic auditing tool, and that's what it's called in the HackPad, and it's a subtask in there. Okay, so to explain the concept behind it, if you do a typical Google search, you have a hypothesis, you put it into Google, it comes back with your list with what you want, and you select from that. With our tool, it's more a reverse Google. You put your data in, you put in receipts or bid documents or bid numbers or fax numbers, and you say, here's what I have, tell me what to look for, okay? So here's what it might look for. You upload your data and it looks for the signal. So from a fraud point of view, it might on the left side, you have the reverse Google, here's my stuff. On the right side, it says here, this is a bit form. It's a typical bit form from this environment. And here's the fraud score based on the big data calculation or the algorithm that runs through it. So I'm going to turn it over to our genius hacker here to show you what the end product actually looks like.
Keep going.
Sorry.
No worries.
It's over on the live site.
There you go.
So we wanted to leave today with something that's not just a concept, but actually is a website. And this is what the website looks like when you start. It's just a big box, because if you think about who's the type of person that's most likely to have a vested interest in catching fraud, it's going to be someone probably at the local level who is the victim of fraud. So they tend to be less experienced with technology. They don't want a whole lot of bells and whistles. And so what this does is you can take data from anywhere, paste it into this box, and hit check. Where's the rest of the thing?
Oh, sure. This. Oh, just
no,
kidding.
Go to the next page.
There we go.
Is that okay? Good. So if you run that website, and the link is in the hackpad, this is what it turns back. And what you're looking at the top is something called Benford's test, and that was where we started with. Basically, you can look at the numbers in documents, and they should fall into a particular pattern when they are real data that are not constrained, and they're not generated by someone just typing in numbers at random from an Excel spreadsheet. Turns out that when you try to make up random numbers as a human, you end up making very non-random numbers. Below that, what we're trying to get to, did I go back?
Yeah, if you want to do just double finger touch.
Okay. Why is it not going up?
Do you want to go back to the old page?
I just want to scroll up and down.
Try using 2 fingers to just on this trackpad.
Okay, I'm not a Mac person.
Here, sorry. I know it's a little bit.
All right.
Weird.
Leave it in the middle there. Okay. Thank you.
I'll be your scroll pad. No worries.
And I really appreciate the technical assistance.
You get close over a weekend. I'll scroll for you.
Okay, so if someone who is a victim of fraud and we want to transform them into an agent for change, this has to give them a lot of really simple instruction. And we were thinking of someone who doesn't even speak English here. So I love Sesame Street, and I like to think that Sesame Street is a great way of looking at data analysis. So which of these things is not like the other is my principal mode of analysis. So there's a summary up there. It says, your document resembles an organization's budget, but appears to be summary data. And this is not the perfect type of data you want to use in this test, but it can basically then give you a benchmark. The bell curves you see there drawn out in the spark lines in blue are taken from a real data set of 400 organization documents that have been approved, and we know that they're legitimate organizations. And then it just plots what you uploaded on the bell curve. If it's red, then it fails that particular test. For example, the first one here says the total deviation from the first digit distribution is 42. And 42 doesn't mean anything to you until you see, oh, it's red, so that's too high. The other stuff where you're comparing the text in these budgets against hundreds of other legitimate organization budgets passes because it's very similar to that. So that's what we're trying to do with this. And we have examples of this. The groups that we had over the weekend, we had 8 people here, and it's great to have such dedicated people. Some of us were working on examples of use cases. Other people were working on examples of documentation. And a few of us were working on beefing up this so that eventually it can identify what kind of document you just gave it and what questions you should ask of that type of document afterwards.
Just switch you over here. Sure.
Yeah.
All right, just go. There you go.
Okay. The beautiful thing about this tool is, well, 2 things. One, it's gathering on the front line. It's out in real time, gathering data in real time. So you're getting results and feedbacks in 2 days, 2 weeks, as opposed to 6 months or a year. And it can be used by anybody from investment firms down to community organizations, because it's all the people on the ground. The business case for it is that, as Mark was saying, it transforms victims of fraud into agents of change. It contains the problem, the fraud problem, at the source before it can grow over time. It's a faster and cheaper process, obviously, you don't explain that. And from a technical point of view, it's easier to analyze unfiltered data because the data is coming in, as I say, from the front line raw, and it's not being cleaned or processed over a period of months or a year or filtered. So that's it. And You want to talk to?
So I wanted to give a shout out to the team that was here. So we have Dita and Johannes here today. Sandra's an honorary member. And we had 8 people in all, one person who just came down from New York and then took the train back like in the middle of the night. And also I want to thank Sam from the World Bank, who saw a blog post about an earlier version of this and saw the potential of having us come in here and build something this weekend. And if you have any questions about this, we'd love to talk to you afterwards.
Amazing. I'm sure the fraud and corruption team can speak to what it's like to have to look through thousands, tens of thousands of bids, and how amazing a tool like that could be to at least signal that there might be something suspicious. So really amazing work. And I want to open it up to any questions you guys had for these guys before we move on. Questions? Quiet crowd. All right, we had coffee, right? We gave people coffee? Okay. All right, well, if you guys want to talk more about this amazing tool, please find Mark or Dominic after the talks. And thank you guys again. Fantastic. Okay, coming up on the end here, I want to introduce you guys Cece Wei and Taimur Saeed, who are working with the fraud and corruption team that not only encompassed 4 tables between about 6 experts and 40 data divers, but not 1, but 2 people who brought desktop computers. So that alone counts for something. I'll just turn it over to them from there, Cece and Taimur.
Hi guys. So we had a lot of like sub projects that we were working. We actually had 7. So we might just like kind of run through these really quickly. So one of the things we realized like quickly is that the World Bank has a lot of rich data sets they have internally, but they're not really connected. So one of the tasks that one of our groups, one of the subgroups tried to work on was connecting the debarment data of like known firms that have committed some kind of fraud with the project that they worked in. And we kind of worked towards that goal. We actually, because the World Bank only has a list of their currently debarred companies. So what we did was we used the look back machine. We scraped all the entire list from like 2005 to current of all companies that have been debarred. And hopefully we're working towards integrating that with the project data. And while that was happening, one of our group members decided to do some old-fashioned like investigating, and she zoomed in on a single country and looked at and like went through contractors in detail, doing like, you know, just like old school research, finding, and she found like, you know, looking for particular relationships between contractors. She found some instances, of people misrepresenting information. Like they said that, like in the contract, they said that they were based in one country, but their corporate home site says they're based in another country. And she'd ideally like to, like, you know, work towards getting more data on the contractors and on the subcontractors that use the World Bank finances. And then we also had a really awesome project with one of the desktop guys. They actually decided to create a database and to help find and like collect all the information on all companies that, you know, are contractors for the World Bank. And they actually built a database and an API. And this is an example of the screenshot. And so this would be an awesome tool for people in the fraud and corruption unit, because you can actually go through and click on each link, and it'll give you detailed information on that company, where they're working at, what projects they've been working at, and any kind of relationships they might have with some other company. And ideally, these guys, you know, they like to continue their project, and they want to get more data sources to use, because they actually, all this data, the profile data on the companies was actually scraped from the internet using different search APIs. I think, yeah.
Another one of our team members started out with all of the project data from the World Bank projects from the 1940s to present day. And he analyzed the data by month, right? Which kind of showed us, hey, why are all of these projects being approved in June, right? Well, it turns out after, you know, talking to one of our experts that it's the end of the fiscal year. And so everybody's trying to get all of their projects in at the same time. So then, bam, he was like, let's map it out by month. And as you can see, right, as the year kind of progresses, now June is at the end, so pay attention, that's the last month, right? Everything, it's like ramping down, we're okay, and then all of a sudden March, April, May, June, right? So the takeaway from this project is really, maybe we should put a lot of emphasis on investigating projects that are approved in June for due diligence.
So, am I next?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there. Can you,
Zach.
So then another one of our group members decided to collect data from the supplier and funding information we had and map it. And so this is an example. These two maps show, the top one shows the supplier, number of supplier contracts by country, and the bottom one shows the borrower contracts by country. And so you can actually see which countries typically get contracts, and which countries get suppliers. And there's a lot of interesting information contained there. And then he decided to further look at the debarred data and see which countries had companies that had companies that got debarred and what were the reasons for debarment. So and this is actually he developed an interactive tool, but this is sort of a screenshot. So if you look at the tool, you can actually click on each pie chart and you'll see the distribution of the reasons why these companies were debarred. Yeah.
So then another one of our team members started out with all of the major contracts from the World Bank that were awarded between 2007 and 2012. And he kind of looked at the commonalities between not only the companies listed in the major contracts, but also the debarment data that we had. And he's looking for similarities, right? So for example, do they have the same address? Do they have the same officers named? And so he computed the relationship. And what you're seeing here is the relationship between one debarred company with all of the other companies in the data set. Right, and so that's just one relationship. If you wanted to, you could see all of the relationships. And so really, he used Gephi to create the visualization. But the key takeaway from this one is, well, if the relationships are so strong, right, really investigate why it is the case that there are so many ties in between these companies, and if it is at all related to fraud or not, right? Maybe it's for a natural reason, like everybody makes pavement, and so we all bid on the same things. And then the next one this is a very similar project that another one of our team members did, which is looking at all of the awarded contracts from the World Bank site, and it's about 5,000 web pages that were scraped to sort of find this data visualization, and we're parsing data about bids specifically, as well as who won the bid and who was rejected and who was evaluated. And so looking at this, we collected the metadata about the contract and all the data about the bidder specifically and created a large CSV to have that in all one comprehensive place. And to see sort of if there is a basis to look for co-bidding collusion, we mapped out exactly which companies were always showing up for the bids for the same projects. So here in each of these clusters, we're basically saying the stronger the ties between two nodes is that the more often those two companies are always bidding against the same thing. And sort of these 7 or 8 clusters just shot out of the data. And so for this one, where to go next, right, is to really go back to the beginning, reinvestigate the data that's going into this visualization, and see if there is something to be said about co-bidding collusion in these areas. So basically, right, we did a lot of things. We really found a lot of loosely connected data sets, which with a little bit of effort could be used to investigate really meaningful relationships. So I think going forward, all of the wonderful work that the fraud and corruption team volunteers have done is set the foundation for the World Bank to investigate the relationships that they have found. So we would love to have everybody on the team stand up right now.
Come on, come on, everybody.
Thank you guys, and we want to say special thank you to Mark and Simon and Betsy and Steve and Marcelo and Peter and everyone else at the World Bank that were so supportive of all of our questions and helping us get to all of this.
Yep. Thanks. Yep. Yeah, sure. All right.
Awesome stuff. I think it was maybe Simon's Scotland Yard influence on this team that had everyone sort of around, like I was watching an episode of CSI, where everyone was sleuthing a different way and putting up Goodwill Hunting charts like this, which I just thought was awesome. So really quickly, any questions for this team? Big hand back there.
Could you say some more detail about the process of scraping the data about projects from the of contractors or companies from the World Bank web pages?
Sure. So before the data dive, we had collected data on the project, and within that, we also pulled out data that linked to contract notices and contract awards. And so the volunteers who were working on our team had access to that data. Mm-hmm. So that basically linked to the procurement notices. And then within that, it's sort of hard coded. So they had to use basically kind of simple rules to like pull out like the contractor names, the awards they bid, you know, and the number of bidders that were in a certain like contract bidding process.
Okay, so that was done in advance.
No.
Some of it was done in advance, some of it was done
on the
here.
day, yeah.
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 Cool. So if you guys have other questions about this, please find CC or Tamer after. There's a lot here. And again, that team I just loved looking over there, and there were so many engaged World Bank people. I want to just shout you guys out again for staying and being committed and answering these questions. Like, thank you guys so much. And that brings up one other thing I want to mention before we bring our last group up, which is that as they were talking about combining all this data from open World Bank sources and other data sources, there were no lack of issues where people said, oh, why isn't there a contract number in this data set? If only I had a last name, I could link these two things. That's a hassle that we're used to at any data dive, and anyone dealing with data will inevitably run into situations where things are lacking. But one person found that so irksome and really so necessary to change, really to find those issues and understand what data might be needed could in fact be an even more important outcome than any map or visualization that comes out. Someone felt like taking that torch up so much that he named himself the Anti-Hassle Czar. And Nick Ursa, who's standing over there, raise a hand, Nick, went around. Nick interviewed everyone about what their biggest hassles were and collected all of that information in a hack pad. He played journalist and therapist to many people throughout the day. And we've collected all of that information. So I want to point out that one of the aside from his amazing efforts, which deserve notice on their own, one of the outcomes of this event will be, this was cool, but here's what could happen if I had this. Or does somebody have this? Oh, if only we had one more column, you guys could predict everything. So that is something that I want to point out. You won't see on any flashy graphic, but is incredibly useful. And I want to thank everyone who put their efforts into that. It's huge.
That hack pad is still open, and now that you guys are kind of done with getting stuff together at the last minute, take a moment to reflect on the process. It's maybe a good time to just put in a few lines about what was your issue. Because we're maybe at the beginning of a cultural change with regard to the closeness of data in organizations. And unless there's a feedback mechanism for these open data initiatives, because we're the proxy customers for all these efforts, in most organizations they're fledgling efforts by like kind of more innovative, maybe kind of staff who are coming from an open source background or some other open background. And we need to encourage them and we need to give them success. So please feedback. And then people at the World Bank, they'll use that. But as they themselves disperse into other organizations, they're going to carry this torch with them. And then one day, there'll just be a cultural expectation of ease of transparency. And part of transparency is reducing friction.
Yes, a million times yes. Awesome. Love it. All right, now last but certainly not least, we had an amazing partner come into this because as I mentioned before, the World Bank is not just the only one interested in these issues of poverty, corruption, and making the world a better place. The UN Development Program was here as well and had a fantastic problem around looking at their capacity and how to best arrange it. And to talk about that, I want to invite Monique Williams and Harlan Harris up to the stage. So welcome, Monique and Harlan. Just get rid of that for you. Sorry, guys. Everything is hiding from me. There we go. All right. You just use the arrows.
Okay. Good morning. We were told we had 3 minutes to present, and we took that literally. So we'll try to be quick. But we did a lot of work this weekend, and we want to share some of it with you. We started with the problem of trying to understand, very similar to what Ken and Ben presented, that we were looking at for the UNPD, how best to allocate their staff resources for increasing expenditure to the countries. And we did do some modeling, and similar to what they found, it's very difficult to predict. But we're going to tell you that some key issues are really related to data and to measurement. So I'm going to turn it over to Harlan now.
Thanks. So yeah, we had a great team working on this from a variety of different angles, from mapping the data that we had to building predictive models and sort of everything in between. A large amount of data munging and data cleaning, as you'd expect. So to the data that we were given sort of two primary data sets. One was a list of programs from the last 5 years, so various properties of the programs, geographies, the budget for individual programs, the expenditures for the programs, and some other properties. That was one. The second one was a big list of staff. So what was their role? What was their grade, like their sort of seniority level? How long had they been with UNDP? Gender, a variety of other things, and a link back to the programs that they were associated with on any given year. We also, with the help of our UNDP colleagues on the team, were able to get salaries based on staff level to understand something about overhead costs, obviously just a proxy, a rough proxy. And so given all this data, there were several different directions. So one group sort of dove right into that data and started looking at observations, things like trends over time, relationships among staffs, proportion of staff versus contractors versus volunteers on projects, things like program size, region, and so forth. I encourage you to check out our HackPad where many of these visualizations ended up. The other group was trying to understand something about metrics. So there wasn't necessarily a performance indicator here. We weren't looking at the outcome of the project so much as the efficiency of getting money spent effectively. So there's two parts to that, which is what this graph is. So one is that it's good if your program expends the money that was budgeted to it. If you weren't able to figure out how to spend that money, that's a problem. And so the x-axis of this graph shows projects that were either able to meet or potentially exceed their budget or spent considerably less than their budget. The other issue that we got, and some of the other data munging, is we were able to take staff who were not allocated to programs within a country, sum up their salaries, reallocate them back to the programs in that country in that year based on the size, and use that as some sort of rough proxy for overhead costs. So if you spent a certain amount of money on a project, but that was dominated by your overhead costs, that maybe wasn't an effective use of resources. And so this is showing each dot is an individual program. The red ones are the largest ones, so $1 million projects are larger. And I sort of arbitrarily split this into 4 categories. So if you were near the target, that would be one category. If you spent a lot, that might be good. It might not be not good. It's kind of hard to say. We don't really know. If you couldn't spend 75% or as much as 75%, that was another category. And if you had a high overhead, that was a 4th category. And we only had a small amount of time to build models of this. I'm just going to show you really quickly. So trying to predict whether you failed to spend the budget, a variety of properties sort of jumped out. This is a classification tree. So there were things like, they tended to focus on things like region, focus area, budget, and years of service was sort of a secondary thing. So that was one of our discoveries, is that the things that are dominating this particular metric were not the properties of the staff, but were properties of the project. And then on the bottom, looking at the projects that tended to overspend their budget by a lot, the things here were more about staff, so years of service is something that has some interesting trends over time as well, and also the staff size, and to a small extent date year as well. We have a lot of ideas for future work, and please check out the HackPad for more of our results. Thanks. Anything else you want to add?
I just want to thank our great team back there. Everybody stayed with us. We got some new people joining. We did do some very interesting work on trying not just to look at expenditure, but expenditure related to the mission of the project. And we got some great data on the Human Development Index that we were merging. We've got a lot of really interesting things in our HackPad, so take a look at it. Thank you.
And of course, we also acknowledge Irina and Lena from UNDP, who came out for this event and stayed the whole weekend and answered a lot of those questions. Give it up for Irina and Lena. Without them, there is no project.
I just want to say another thing, that Ken and Irina and Alina should get together, and we should talk about how we can do this work together, because it really is the same problem, just 2 different organizations.
Fantastic. So any questions for Monique and Harlan? Ooh, lots.
Oh, okay.
Take your pick.
All right.
Everett.
So can you go back a couple slides to the date plot? There was a bunch of lines that abruptly stopped at the bottom that I'm sure you noticed.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah. So some investigation of the reporting bias come in at budget, I guess.
I don't know. I mean, it's certainly the case that there are a large number of projects that don't go over budget, and I think it would probably depend on the circumstances. Things like crisis projects sort of jumped out here as types of projects that tend to go over their allocated budget, and that's probably a good thing, that they were able to find ways to spend money in a crisis. But oh yeah, there's two things going on here. One is there's a cutoff at the budget itself. And the second thing is that these sort of swoopy lines, this is because the numerator and the denominator of this ratio that is on the y-axis are related to each other. And so that each line is one program year, essentially, for a set of projects. Or sorry, one country year for a set of projects.
Very cool stuff. Yes, sir.
It came up a couple of times. I don't know if folks on the team wanted to jump up and talk about anything that you found.
Well, one thing, I think we mentioned that the years of service was related, and we found that over time, the average years of service declined. And that's related to the use of service contractors increasing. The staff, the general staff stayed constant, but the number of service contractors increased over time.
Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff going on related to changes in the way money was allocated to staff. We would have loved to get more into the components of teams. One thing we did find is that there are a large number of projects that just had a single person associated with them. We don't know whether this was a data problem or actually a property of these projects, but it does make it difficult to say, 73% of your one person should be have a particular property to be effective.
Right, and when we're looking at projects that only have one person, you're not looking at a mix of staff. You're looking at a person's individual's characteristics. We don't have any data on like personality or something, any kind of network, that would be associated with that person doing a very good job just in and of himself. We only have these broad staff characteristics. So that's an idea for future work, including some different measures.
Fantastic. Thank you guys again. If you want more questions on these guys. So that was just yet another incredible project that someone in the course of a weekend managed to build an entire machine learning model around. I never cease to be amazed by the amount of work people do in such a little bit of time. So I would like to point out, people keep referring to this mysterious hackpad. This is the hackpad for all of the projects that you saw today. As we mentioned, there is far more on those hackpads than anyone was able to say in 5 minutes. We'll be collecting that into a form for everyone to read, but if you want to just jump in and start getting into the data and the results, it is all right there. So please, can we just give another round of applause for all the projects? They were just incredible. Amazing. Now, before we close, I want to say one thing and announce a very special speaker. One thing to point out is that if you want to talk at all about this process, if you would like to decompress, if you had hassles that you brought up to Nick, if you just want to talk about the projects or reconnoiter with your team a bit more, there will be a roundtable with the World Bank representatives right after we close. We're going to gather, Prasanna, will it be in here or? Hey, Prasanna, will that be here? Will the roundtable be in this room? Right here. So if you want to hang around, you don't have to. When we close, you're free to your Sunday, but enjoy St. Patrick's Day. But if you'd like to stay and talk, we'll be here. So stick around, please. We'd love to hear your feedback. Before we close, I would like to invite a very special guest up. We have Jane Campbell here from the World Bank. She is an incredibly important sponsor of this event, a big advocate at the bank. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jane Campbell.
Hi, everyone. I am fortunate enough to be affiliated with the team, one of the World Bank teams that was responsible for putting this together. So I'm not an expert in this field at all. I know very little about data. I'm certainly not an expert in poverty measurement or fraud and corruption, but my background is in learning and organizational communication, and I have to say it's been an absolutely fascinating and thoroughly encouraging exercise to watch the way in which this has come together and the way in which you all have worked together over the last day and a half. It's really phenomenal. I'm very impressed. But my actual role here right now is to introduce a couple of people who are experts in the areas that you've been looking at. So we're fortunate to have with us today Peter Landau from DEC. He is a well-respected worldwide expert in poverty measurement. And Steve Zimmerman, who is the Director of External Investigations in our INT unit. So he, again, is recognized inside and out for his expertise in fraud and corruption and investigations. So I'd like to invite them up to the stage to respond as experts to some of the things that you've put forward, some of the questions that you've raised, and some of the potential follow-up that you've put on the table. But again, personally, thank you so much for everything that you've done.
Go first. Hi, I'm Steve Zimmerman, Director of Operations in the Integrity Vice Presidency. Wow, I've only been here an hour, and that was pretty overwhelming. I was thinking as I walked in, you know, I always like to think of myself as a reasonably tech-savvy guy. Yes, I have an iPad 4. This weekend has really been sort of the two extremes for me. Yesterday, I was speaking to my mom, and I told her that I had just bought my son a new iPhone, to which my mother responded, "What's an iPhone?" And I said, okay, I can answer that question. And then I come here and I'm just like really just stunned by how much you did, not just how much you did, but how quickly you were able to dive in to really the nitty-gritty of the issues that face us here at the World Bank, and how quickly you were able to come up with suggestions and ideas of how to take it forward. It really is absolutely amazing. You know, we have the modestly difficult task here at the bank of both eliminating poverty and eliminating corruption. And I have sometimes been daunted by that task. But after listening to you guys, the possibilities that we simply haven't sat down and considered or haven't really been able to dig into, and the data that we simply have not taken advantage of is really overwhelming. And I'm just so excited by today, but more importantly by tomorrow. I was sitting with my group over there, guys from my office, who were just, you know, brimming with enthusiasm and immediately start spewing out ideas. Okay, what are we going to do with this? How are we going to do this? I mean, we're the World Bank. I mean, we sit on mountains of data, and then we're thinking, well, maybe the data we have, there's a lot of room to improve the data, and then there's obviously a lot of room we can do to master that data. And one of the beauties of the World Bank is we get to look we use ourselves essentially as an experiment. We can spend a day like today or a weekend like this and talk about the bank, but then the real challenge now is to partner with the UNDP and partner with the other international organizations and then partner with national governments around the world. One of the things that I'm most excited about being associated with the World Bank is its ability to convene a group like you and then take the lessons that we learn here and spin them out on a worldwide scale. So this is just an amazing opportunity. And so why don't I let my colleague here make some comments, and then we can talk a bit more about some of the details if you'd like.
Thanks very much, Steve, and well, thanks very much for giving me this chance to say a few words. I came in this morning not really knowing exactly what to expect and what I was going to be hearing, but I have to say, I think a bit like Steve, I've come away, you know, frankly, somewhat dazzled by what's been going on here and the energy that's been sort of on display, as well as the sort of expertise and the technical know-how. I'm the manager in the research group here at the World Bank and in charge of sort of research on poverty and inequality analysis and so on. So we spend a lot of our time thinking about how to measure poverty, how to track poverty, how to monitor the bank's progress in reducing poverty globally. And in my team, we've been sort of in the thick of things, looking at collecting data, analyzing data for a very long time, and we've been very much at the forefront of trying to make these data available in an open sort of way with the kind of data sets that with household surveys that we collect and so on. One of the things that we've learned over the years with the kind of work we've been doing is there's a lot that we need to learn about how to use data and what is it exactly that's data that's telling us, and how is it that data, good data handled properly, can give us really deep insights into what's going on, and bad data handled improperly can very likely obfuscate rather than illuminate the kind of issues at hand. And what I very much liked about the discussions that I've been hearing here today is the extent to which there's a real interest in not just analyzing or getting stuck into the data work, but also understanding what it is that these data are telling us. What is it that we can actually learn from these data? There's a revolution going on, as I can detect all of you are all very excited about, and I am too, which is just this enormous explosion of data being available. And this raises challenges. There's things that 10 years ago we wouldn't have been able to do with these data simply because of the computational challenges that would have been associated with those massive types of data sets that we're looking at. These things are changing by the day, and we're able to make many inroads into this type of data analysis. And it's something that's really exciting to me to see how things I had never even considered or were possible, I'm seeing here on display, and it's really quite exciting to see how that's being done. One of the things that I feel is really important also to recognize is that I suspect that this is, as you all agree, this is a long process. And one of the things that we're hearing a lot about here today is about associations between different types of data and how we can correlate things and how we can relate things. And I think that's deeply important, but it's also very much the starting point. Ultimately, what we would want to do, and I really want to try and enlist your support and interest in this as well, is to not just look at these correlations and these associations, but then also try to understand the causal links between the types of data that we're looking at. If we feel like there's electricity on the one hand and there's poverty on the other hand, it's one thing to look at the association between these things. The next thing is to sort of help us understand how is it that electricity can actually help reduce poverty. What are the causal links between these types of things? And this is, just a lot of work ahead to go and very exciting. I'd like to thank all of you, the volunteers in the first instance, for showing this amazing energy and being involved in this very exciting way. I'd like to thank the bank teams that have been involved here. I've always been struck. I've been at the bank for about 20 years now, and I'm surprised on a daily basis by the kind of dedication that bank staff show to the work that they're doing, and that was on display here as well in terms of the numbers of you that are here and they're participating in this project. I'd like to thank very much the external partners who have participated in this effort, the UNDP, the Global Pulse, the Qatar Institute, and so on. And I'd just like to thank very much to everyone here for participating in this and showing us what can be done with this type of data dive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, real pleasure. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it. Fantastic. Thank you so much for being here, Jane, Steve, and Peter. It's hugely impressive to have you come share your Sunday morning with us listening to these things. So thank you again. And really amazing, really forward-looking thoughts to think about how we're using data in the bank. And these guys are leading the way, so really great to have you with us. So, everyone still excited? Yeah, you still got some energy in you? All right, cool, awesome. Well, this brings us to the close of the DC Big Data Dive. But of course, we need to send some thanks to some people without whom none of this would have been possible. Of course, we have to send huge thanks to the beautiful AV team, the catering team, and the people who helped keep this place clean and wonderful. So give it up for everyone who made this an awesome space. Thank you. The World Bank was incredibly gracious in hosting us here. And two people in particular, Michelle Atkinson and Atir, whose name I cannot quite recall now, but Atir is back here. You all know are the people who were able to do an amazing amount of work in coordinating this. Logistics. We needed whiteboards. Whiteboards appeared. We needed outlets. They showed up. They were running around all weekend making all this happen. So please give it up for Michelle and Atir. As Peter mentioned, this is not just a World Bank event. The partners came into this. This is a huge group of people working to make the world a better place. So to UNDP, UN Global Pulse, QCRI, and probably others I'm forgetting, many more acronyms who have gone into this effort. Thank you to all the partners, without whom there wouldn't be these projects. And I want to mention on the project front, I've mentioned before, and people may know publicly, my feelings and DataKind's feelings about the way weekend events go. And we feel very strongly that these events work best when people collaborate to understand what it is they're actually doing. I mean, opening data and hacking on it is fun, but not as good as if people really think about what they're going to do ahead of time. And to that end, there are a group of people we've called out before but deserve mention in their own right. The team that we call our data ambassadors, who have given up their spare time, not just this weekend, but in the months leading up to this, coming down to DC with us to meet with the World Bank to understand the problems, staying up over weekends, crunching this data in advance just to find out today that it needed more crunching. You don't know what it would have been like without that. Believe me, you don't know the pains that you have avoided already. So I really need to acknowledge these people. Please stand up. Max Schroen, Nick McClellan, Max Richmond, Rise, Monique Williams, Stan and Harlan Harris, Daniel Terse, Tom Levine, Cece Wei, Timer Saeed. Who am I forgetting? You guys are amazing. So thank you. Amazing work. Thank you, guys. Yeah, amazing work, you guys. And related, of course, those guys could just prep data. We could find some open data sets and show up and say, we're going to make some cool graphs. But none of that would be cool if we didn't have people on the other side telling us what was a cool graph, or telling us why what we were about to do was super stupid. We believe so strongly at DataKind that this is about building collaborative teams to solve these problems, and to that end, we cannot thank enough the World Bank team, who on this other side of that process took time out of their schedules to come talk to data analysts who are excited but aren't experts in their field, talked with us on the phone, gave us data, were sending us data overnight at times on their emails that I don't want to even admit they were still awake. So please, to everyone from Simon, Betsy, Steve, Nobuo, there are people I'm going to forget, so everyone from the World Bank, Ken in the back, please stand up and let us honor you again, Amparo and others, for all of your effort. Santiago, Wolfgang, of course. And who else am I missing? Yell it out. Patience. Thank you guys from the Poverty and Fraud and Corruption team. And the perfect lead-in, of course, is that this event would not have happened if there wasn't an advocate for it. If there wasn't someone to go around and say, we need this to happen. We need a visionary change in how we're going to look at data in the bank. And we're going to go around and actually put in the legwork to getting those people to come to those meetings, to finding the people who know what to do with the data. And those people who have been champions for this from longer than I can even remember, I think maybe almost 8 months ago, maybe a year ago, Julia Bezgacheva and Prasanna Lal Das have been huge in this. Without them, this would not have happened. Please give it up for them. They, yes, are incredible. Incredible people. And we're just seeing one event. This is like our event that DataKind's involved in. They've been running these events with the partners across the world. We were at the meeting with Prasanna that he had to leave early because he had to fly to Vienna to do another one of these. So they have been putting in massive efforts into changing the way innovation is done in the bank and with the partners. And it's really just, it's mind-blowing, really. So thank you guys so much for that. One last very important person, of course, DataKind loves being a partner in this. We're just a smaller player in the bigger aspect of this, but I'm even the smallest player in this. I just get to stand up and talk to people, which is fun. The person who, behind the scenes, keeps everything running on our end, who you may have seen while you were signing in, or is secretly emailing out about the food logistics and things that you maybe didn't know were happening behind the scenes, is Craig Borowski. Craig, stand up. Give it up, the other half of DataKind. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Without Craig, I may not have even hit my alarm this morning, which is humorously going off right now. So I would be like, oh, right, that thing. Cool. So, of course, I want to thank all of those people doubly from my heart. But really, I know this sounds corny every time, and I haven't found a non-corny way to say it yet, so maybe someone can help me out. I can't thank you guys enough. Seriously, the fact that you guys came out everyone, all the volunteers who sacrificed a weekend. As I said on Friday, I'm shocked that anyone besides me and maybe a few of my nerdy friends show up. The fact that you all came out not just to have fun and not just to work, even though we did do those things, but to try to make a difference. To that, I feel like that deserves an enormous round of applause to everyone involved. Thank you. You make this what it is. Without your business. Okay. Your hands are tired, I get it, no more clapping. So I want to close by bringing up something that Steve brought up, which is really, 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 really important. So important that I'm going to get close. Which is that this was really fun. What happens Monday? We just go to the HackPad? Who's going to do that? We all have jobs. All of you have things to do. You guys have budgets to worry about and other program things. So how do you go from this to something bigger? And that's something that we have been, at DataKind, think about constantly. That is exactly why we run these events, is not to have the event, but to have the event lead to bigger things. So what I want to say to you is if you are somebody who came to volunteer, and this is your first event, and you want to know, how do I keep doing this? Come to datakind.org. Come talk to us. If you're at the World Bank or one of the partners who's saying, oh my God, this is what we could be doing, how could we do more of this? Come talk to us. Come to DataKind. What we know about these things is these weekend events are fantastic. They're great. But what really needs to happen from there is to continue those collaborations, to make sure that the people who have the ability to work with data and want to help are connected with the people who actually know the problems, so that we're not just hacking on open data for fun in our free time, and so that you guys aren't still just sort of coming in just for a weekend and then going back to work. So I will say there are many opportunities to move forward, and I mean, there are a growing number of opportunities just around the world for these things to happen. So I hope that you guys have formed great partnerships. Get those cards of those people. We have emails that people have put on the HackPad, so talk within your teams. But otherwise, I would say we want this to be the beginning of something much, much greater than this. So thank you to everyone who has made it an incredible foundation for great things to happen and has already done amazing work, really, seriously, in these last 48 hours. So thank you again. Feel free to stick around for the round table, and otherwise, thank you for making this a great event. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Thanks, guys.